She helped a millionaire man with his son in the storm, never imagining he would change her life forever. Before the story begins, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you love emotional love stories full of twists and heartwarming endings, subscribe to the channel. That really helps more people discover these stories and helps our channel grow every day. Night fell over Nashville like a heavy-lidden cloak. The low clouds seemed to whisper omens, and the rain poured down relentlessly, thick, merciless, as if it wanted to wash away every street, every rooftop, every trace of hope. The wind howled between the streetlights in the outskirts while lightning split the sky, revealing for moments the silhouettes of unfinished houses and makeshift trailers sunk in the mud. Grace Sullivan clutched the thin coat tighter around her slender body. Her dark blonde hair stuck to her forehead, dripping cold water. Her soaked sneakers sank into every puddle on the cracked asphalt as she carried, in a cloth bag, some stale bread and 2 cartons of milk, what was left from her shift at the market. She was exhausted like every day, but as she turned the corner near the overpass, something made her stop. There was a car stopped in the middle of the flooded street. A car that didn't belong in that neighborhood, black, shiny, with elegant lines. A luxury SUV slowly sinking into the muddy water. And inside, a desperate man was banging on the fogged-up windows with an open hand, trying to stay calm for the boy screaming in the back seat. "Somebody help me," he shouted, his voice muffled by the glass and the rain. "There's a child in here." Grace's eyes widened. No one else seemed to be around. That forgotten street was the end of the world. She ran, ignoring the biting cold and the water already rising to her shins. She reached the driver's window and saw the man, soaked, dark brown hair stuck to his forehead, light eyes wide with fear and frustration. The boy sobbed softly, clinging to the seatbelt, his very blue eyes wide open, his hands trembling. "The door won't open, it's stuck," he shouted when he saw her. "Please, help my son first." Without hesitation, Grace yanked the handle, but it was jammed. She then took off her soaked coat and wrapped it around her arm, took 2 steps back, and broke the side window with a stone from the sidewalk. A dry crash. The boy screamed. She didn't stop. "It's okay, little one. You're going to be fine. I'm getting you out of here. Do you hear me?" she said with a firm voice, though her heart was racing. Carefully, she reached an hand, unlocked the back door from the inside. In seconds, she pulled the boy out, wrapping him in her own body to shield him from the rain. He trembled, soaked to the bone, sobbing against her shoulder. "Now you quickly," she said to the man. The driver got out through the other door, nearly stumbling in the shallow current. He was drenched, coatless, holding a useless phone in his hands. His features were strong, but at that moment, they looked worn out, shadowed by dark circles and something more. Guilt? Pain? It was impossible to tell. "There's a shelter nearby. It's just a trailer, but it's dry," Grace said, not waiting for a response. "Follow me." The man didn't argue. He just nodded and picked up the pace beside her, one hand on his son's shoulder. With every clap of thunder, the boy curled up more. They reached the trailer in 5 minutes that felt like an eternity. It was small, with a worn metal frame, but Grace kept it clean and warm with the little she had. As soon as they entered, she turned on the single bulb hanging from the ceiling and rushed to grab a thin towel, blankets, and the electric kettle. "Sit down. Take off those wet clothes. I'll be right back," she said, going to the makeshift cabinet. The man obeyed in silence. The boy, still clinging to his father's leg, looked around the inside of the trailer with wide eyes, as if it were the first time in a long while he had seen a safe place. Grace knelt in front of the little one, handing him a mug with warm chocolate made in a rush. "What's your name, sweetheart?" He looked at his father, then whispered, "Ethan." "And you?" she asked the man, handing him a worn blanket. He hesitated, wiping water from his beard with an automatic gesture. "You can call me Logan." She felt that wasn't his full name, but she didn't ask anything else. That night, while the wind howled outside and the trailer shook with the storm's force, three strangers shared a silence that said more than any words could. Logan watched Grace as she tucked Ethan into the makeshift bed as if he were seeing something impossible, someone offering everything, even when they had almost nothing. And he still hadn't told her who he really was. The sound of the storm outside gave way to calmer breathing inside the small trailer. The dim light from the bulb hanging from the ceiling cast soft shadows on the time-stained metal walls. Ethan, now dry and wrapped in a thin blanket with faded star patterns, rested in Grace's lap. His body still trembled, but his eyes, for the first time that night, were beginning to close. "Are you hungry?" she asked, her voice sweet and low, like a song without a melody. The boy nodded silently. Grace stood up carefully, covering him with the blanket. She walked to the small electric stove and warmed up the last portion of potato and carrot soup she had made that morning, her planned meal for the next 2 days. Logan watched her from where he sat on the only wooden bench against the wall. His suit was still dripping, but he had already swapped a wet shirt for an old C-shirt Grace had offered him, clearly far too big for his athletic frame, but strangely comfortable in that space so far from his reality. "You didn't have to do this," he said at last, as she poured the soup into 2 cracked mugs. "Didn't have to do what? Help a father and a child out in the street?" "Of course I did," she replied without looking at him, but with firmness. In her voice, Logan lowered his gaze, embarrassed. He couldn't remember the last time someone had helped him without first asking his last name or his bank balance. Grace placed one of the mugs in his hands and knelt again beside Ethan, helping. "The boy hold the other. Careful, it's hot, but it'll do you good." The boy drank with his eyes closed, and for a few seconds, the silence inside the trailer was almost sacred. A kind of rare, fragile peace. Deeply human doubt after the meal, she led them to the small bed at the back of the trailer, barely big enough for 3, but still, she insisted. "Sleep here." "I'll stay on the armchair," she said, already spreading a thin sheet over the improvised seat. "You should sleep in the bed. It's your home," Logan replied in a gentler tone. "And that's exactly why you need it tonight," she said, smiling for the first time that night. He wanted to say something more, but no words came. Instead, he watched her. The way she tied up her dark blonde hair so practically, how her light blue eyes seemed to hold an old tiredness and yet still carried a gentleness untouched. She was beautiful in a way that didn't shout, it just remained, as if she didn't know it. Ethan fell asleep first. His small body finally surrendered to exhaustion, cradled by the warmth of the blanket, the sound of rain on the roof, and the unlikely safety of that unknown woman. Logan didn't sleep. He lay beside his son, eyes fixed on the metal ceiling. Fingers intertwined over his chest. His mind raced. He still hadn't told her who he was, or why he was there. He felt ashamed. To need so badly someone who didn't know him, and who, even so, treated him as if he deserved to be there. When the clock passed 5 in the morning, the sky still dark, Logan got up in silence. He looked at his son, who was sleeping deeply, then looked at Grace, wrapped in a thin blanket. On the armchair, her face tilted to the side and an expression of pure exhaustion. Her hair messy, her hands resting on her chest. There was a rare serenity there. He walked slowly to the table and grabbed a crumpled piece of paper from the counter. He wrote a few words with the pen he'd borrowed from the market, still. In his pocket, "Thank you, truly." He folded the paper and left it on the microwave. Then he picked up his now charged phone and called someone. A male voice answered on the third ring. "I've located you." "I've sent the car," said the voice. "Don't tell anyone where I was," Logan replied. "Not even my sister, not yet." He stepped out carefully, closing the trailer door. Without making a sound, the rain was now just a light drizzle. The storm had passed, but something inside him still felt on the verge of collapse. And Grace, waking minutes later to the strange silence in the house, found the note on the counter. She read it, folded it carefully, and looked at the empty bed. Not even his scent remained. She stood there, still, feeling a tightness in her chest she didn't know how to name. That morning, the silence inside the trailer felt heavier than the sound of the storm the night before. The note still lay on the microwave, carefully folded, as if it could somehow unfold the mystery now pulsing in Grace's chest. She didn't know why, but she felt a strange emptiness, as if she had been given something precious and lost it before even realizing. She tried to ignore the lump in her throat. She needed to rush to her shift at the market. The lot rent was due in 2 days, and there was no room for distractions. She drank her black, bitter coffee, tied her hair up in a practical bun, and left, walking through the still damp streets, never imagining what awaited her on the other side of town. At 9:10 a.m., when the television mounted on the market wall switched to the local news, Grace's world came to a halt. Breaking news: billionaire CEO Logan Whitaker disappears with his 6-year-old son following an anonymous tip linked to the suspicious death of his wife, Rachel Whitaker. The image that appeared on the screen next made Grace's stomach twist. It was him, the man in the car during the storm, the same one who had slept in her bed, the one who had simply told her, "You can call me Logan." She didn't realize she had dropped the basket of bread she was carrying. Her coworkers looked at her strangely, but she didn't move. The blood had drained from her face. Sources close to the family say Logan was last seen leaving the hospital with his son, following a brief admission of the child. The Whitaker family, owners of one of the largest real estate empires in the South, deny any involvement in the disappearance, but investigations are ongoing. Logan's wife, Rachel, was found dead 3 weeks ago under still unresolved circumstances. Grace brought a hand to her mouth, her eyes brimming. She remembered his look, so heavy, so silent, like someone carrying something they couldn't speak of. Had she sheltered a fugitive? A murderer? Was he running? She whispered to herself, backing slowly into the stockroom, trying to breathe. Her head spun. She remembered the boy, Ethan, so fragile, so scared, the way he clung to his father like the world was on the verge of collapse. That wasn't an act. That was real pain, real fear. She sat down on a milk crate and held her head in her hands. Sweat trickled down her neck, despite the morning cold. What if he's guilty? What if he used me? She whispered, but the doubt came with another, even more unsettling question. What if he's innocent? Grace knew what it was like to be judged without defense, to be seen only for where you lived, what you wore, where you worked. And now, she found herself facing a dilemma that ate away at her. She could have gone to the police. She could have said he had been in her trailer, but she hadn't. That night, lying in her bed, she stared at the trailer ceiling with open, fixed eyes, as if searching for answers in every water stain. "I saw the way he held his son," she murmured. "I saw the fear in his eyes." Deep down, something told her that Logan wasn't the monster the news painted him to be, but it was just a feeling, and maybe a spark of something more she didn't dare name. While the whole country searched for Logan Whitaker, Grace held the biggest secret of her life. And even without knowing what the future would bring, she felt that man would cross her path again. And when he did, nothing would ever be the same. Time didn't wait for Grace to process everything she was feeling. The following days passed, with a suffocating slowness, every second heavy with the secret she carried alone. She barely slept, haunted by the image of the boy in her arms and the note on the microwave, a memory of something that felt like a dream or a nightmare. And every time the TV reported a new clue in the search for Logan Whitaker, she looked away. That cloudy Tuesday morning, the market was busier than usual. Grace, in her wrinkled light green uniform and crook name tag hanging from her chest, typed product codes with mechanical motions. The sound of the barcode scanner blended with muffled voices, shopping carts, and the cries of restless children. Routine was her armor, until she heard a voice behind her, discreet, male, slightly hoarse. "Sorry, I forgot this." She looked up on instinct, and everything stopped. There, in front of her, with a hesitant expression, stood Logan. But it wasn't the man she remembered. He wore a dark cap, simple reading glasses, an unshaven beard, and a worn-out jacket. He looked different, almost unrecognizable, except for his eyes. That grayish-green tone sliced through the air like a gust of wind. Out of place, he pulled something from his pocket, a child's keychain, with a red teddy bear hanging from a broken blue ring. The same one Ethan held the night of the storm. He realized he lost this last night, he said. Said it was his mom's. Grace couldn't speak. She felt a tremble deep in her stomach, like the ground beneath her was shifting. "You, what are you doing here?" she whispered, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. "I wanted to say thank you and return this." He paused for a long beat. "But I didn't know you worked here." Grace looked around, noticing the other cashiers still busy, but it wouldn't take long for someone to notice him. "The whole city knew who Logan Whitaker was. You shouldn't be here. There are cameras, security. You're being hunted," she said under her breath, firm. "I know. But I needed to see you. Just for a minute." He stepped closer, looking straight into her eyes. "I can explain, please." Her heart pounded like an alarm in her chest. Part of her wanted to send him away. The other part wanted to understand, needed to understand. She looked around once more, then abruptly took off her apron and turned to the colleague beside her. "I need to go to the stockroom. Cover me?" The woman nodded. Surprised, Grace walked out from behind the register, gesturing for Logan to follow her. They walked together to the back exit, passing stacks of boxes and peeling walls. As soon as the metal door closed behind them, silence took over. She crossed her arms. He stood just a few steps away like that night, only now the mystery was greater and the trust much smaller. "Talk. Why'd you come back?" she asked. Logan took a deep breath. His gaze was even heavier than the last time. There was a weariness in him that wasn't physical. "Because you're the only person who's treated me like a human being in months. And because my son asked about you, about the soup lady." The only one who looked at him without fear or pity. Grace swallowed hard. The words hit her with unexpected force. "I saw your face on the news. I heard the accusations. I don't know if I should trust you." "I don't even know if I trust myself, Grace," he said, raw honesty in his voice. "But I swear, I didn't hurt my wife, and someone's trying to erase me. Not for justice, for power." She stared at him for long seconds. She could hear forklifts in the background, the sound of rain starting again outside. But in that narrow hallway between chipped walls, time seemed to fold. "I should turn you in right now," she said, voice steady, though her gaze shook. "Then do it," he replied, not moving a muscle. "But first, just hear me out, just this once." She didn't respond. She simply nodded slowly. And in that moment, between the muffled sound of thunder and the smell of damp boxes, something shifted. It wasn't forgiveness, nor trust. It was just a door opening, again in the most unlikely place. The back hallway still smelled of damp cardboard and expired cleaning products. Grace leaned against the cold wall, arms crossed, waiting for Logan to speak. There was no more room for half-truths. His silence didn't intimidate her, it drained her. Logan took off his cap, ran a hand through his messy hair, and looked up. His eyes were sunken, weary, like he hadn't slept in weeks. "Rachel, my wife, died a month ago," he began, his voice hoarse. Officially, it was a fall, a domestic accident. But there was blood on the handrail and her family's version never made sense. Grace didn't move. The name of the wife, Rachel, now sounded real. No longer a headline, but someone with a scent, a presence, an absence. "And you think someone pushed her?" she asked cautiously. "I think they were waiting for a tragedy. And when it happened, they used it against me," he said, clenching his fists. "My father-in-law always hated me. Never accepted that she wanted to leave the family business. He said I isolated her, that I was unstable. And are you?" She shot back, without flinching. Logan gave a bitter smile. "No, but I became that way. After she died, everything turned to dust. The press circled me. Her family filed for custody of Ethan, said he'd be safer with his grandparents. But they never cared about him. They want the name, not the boy." Grace felt a tightness in her chest. It was hard to understand the world he came from, surrounded by power, lawyers, and cameras. But the pain he described, that she knew intimately. "So you ran," she concluded. "Yes. I took Ethan and left everything. Without thinking. I just wanted to protect him." Grace looked down, remembering the boy curled up in blankets, the way he shook. "No child could fake that. You should have gotten legal help." "I tried. But every liar I contacted had already been bought." She closed her eyes for a moment. The dilemma was growing. But something inside her screamed, "He's telling the truth." In the days that followed, Logan began to show up more often, always discreetly, always with some excuse. A coffee, a bag of groceries, a quick talk. He never asked for help, just for presence. And slowly, the space between mistrust and affection began to shrink. But it didn't take long for the outside world to start creeping into their small universe. It started with a black car parked for hours in front of the market. Then two men with professional cameras pretending to be customers. One of them shamelessly took a photo of Grace during her lunch break outside. "Are you sure you're not being tracked?" she asked Logan days later, seeing him again in the parking lot where the flashes had started. "I change phones and cars every week. But they have eyes everywhere," he said, looking around, tense. The next week, the store manager called her into the back office. Her look was cold, impersonal. "Grace, you're a good worker. But lately you've been drawing too much attention. There are photographers outside nearly every day. Journalists calling. And this morning, your name appeared in a blog as a key witness in the Whitaker case." Grace's legs nearly gave out. "I didn't give any interviews." "That doesn't matter. The company owner wants to steer clear of scandal. You're being let go." She walked out with her uniform folded in her arms, the name tag still clipped to her pocket. It was drizzling. Just like the day she met him. Outside, Logan was waiting in the car, parked at the corner. When he saw her, he rushed to her side. "What happened?" "I got fired," she said, unable to hide the pain in her voice. "You can disappear whenever you want, Logan. I can't. I'm just a regular girl trying to pay rent, and now I've lost everything." He looked like he was about to speak, but she cut him off. "I listened to you. I believed you. But who's going to believe me?" Logan lowered his gaze. For the first time, he looked small, vulnerable. She turned and walked to the bus stop. Every step hurt like a wrong decision, and even without turning back, she felt him still standing there. watching her walk away. The days that followed were long and harsh. Grace stayed locked inside the trailer, curtains closed, heart in pieces. With no salary, rent overdue, and the power bill unpaid, every sound outside felt like an eviction warning. She barely slept, her silent phone resting beside the bed, not knowing whether to expect a message from Logan or a police summons. That morning, under a sky heavy with clouds and a sharp wind cutting through the streets of the neighborhood, Grace gathered the courage to return to the market. Not to beg for her job back, she had too much pride for that, but to collect the last portion of her paycheck that hadn't been deposited. She wore a worn-out gray hoodie, her hair tied back hastily, her gaze steady despite the deep circles under her eyes. As soon as she stepped through the automatic door, she felt the stares. 3 security guards approached immediately. "Miss Sullivan, management has asked that you no longer remain on the premises," one of them said in a robotic tone. "I just came to get my final paycheck. They promised it yesterday over the PS phone," she replied, trying to keep the tremor out of her voice. "We'll escort you to the exit. Is that really necessary?" "I worked here for 2 years," she said louder now, looking around at her former co-workers who pretended not to see. One of them, one of the few Grace had considered a friend, looked away with guilt. As the security guards walked her to the door, someone pulled out their phone and started filming. The caption appeared on social media minutes later. "The mystery woman from the Whitaker case shows up at supermarket. Accomplice?" The video went viral within hours. Grace's face, worn, confused, being coldly pushed out of the only place she had known as a livelihood, spread like wildfire. It was as if the entire country had been given permission to judge her for a crime she didn't commit, for a love that had barely begun, for a choice only the heart could understand. She returned home in shock, too drained to cry. She just sat on the trailer floor, knees pulled in, phone in hand. That's when the screen lit up. It was Logan. "Did you see the video?" he asked directly, his voice tense on the other end. "I saw it." "The whole country saw it," she replied, her throat dry. "I never should have let this happen. I'm going to fix it." "You can't fix my life with a phone call, Logan," she said, barely containing her anger. "That video isn't just a humiliation. It's my dignity on the ground." There was silence. Then he took a deep breath. "Turn on the TV, now." She obeyed, reluctantly. On the afternoon news, there he was, Logan Whitaker. Hair combed, dark suit, eyes steady in front of the cameras. Beside him stood his lawyer. "And Ethan, I don't usually give interviews," he began, "but this time I need to break the silence. There is a woman being unfairly attacked for doing the most human thing someone can do. She helped us when no one else would. She gave us shelter on a night when my son and I had no one left. She is the reason we're alive. And she deserves respect, not condemnation." The screen cut to footage of Grace being escorted out of the market. "This woman's name is Grace Sullivan, and today I want to say publicly, I trust her. And I want everyone to know she has my legal protection and my gratitude." His voice trembled slightly. But it was real. In the trailer, Grace brought a hand to her mouth. She didn't know whether to cry from relief or from fear. Part of her wanted to run. Another part just wanted to breathe without being afraid again. Minutes later, her phone rang again. It was Logan. "You still haven't answered." "Answered what?" "My offer. I have a property outside the city. Quiet, away from cameras. I want you to come with us. Ethan needs you, and so do I." She hesitated. What if all of this is a mistake? Then let it be the most honest mistake of our lives. On the other end of the line, only the sound of breathing, and a silence filled with meaning. "I accept," she said finally, her voice low, almost a whisper. "But not for comfort, For the boy. I know, he replied. That's why I trust you. That night, Grace packed her few clothes into an old backpack. For the first time in years, she felt like she was leaving not out of fear, but by choice. And little did she know, that choice would change everything. The car climbed a winding road lined with old trees until, at the end of the path, the house appeared. It wasn't the ostentatious mansion with golden columns Grace had imagined, but a modern estate, all clean lines, large windows, and walls of concrete and glass. Still, there was something silent and imposing about the place, as if it had been built to keep the world away, not to welcome it. When she entered through the side wing, guided by a housekeeper who spoke little, the first sound she heard was that of her own footsteps on polished wooden floors. Everything was too perfect, too organized, too cold. This is your room. It's separate from the main wing. The boy sleeps down the hall, said the woman, handing her a small key. Mr. Whitaker is in the office. He asked that you rest. Grace nodded, but she didn't rest. She spent the first hours observing every detail of the new space. Bed made with pale linen sheets, a dustless dresser, a window overlooking the lake. All clean, quiet, and empty. Like sleeping inside a glossy magazine. The next morning, she was woken by a soft knock on the door. It was Ethan. He held a book in his hands, his eyes shy, bare feet on the floor. Can you read to me? He asked, his voice barely audible. Grace smiled. Of course. But you'll have to tell me what happened so far, okay? He nodded and sat beside her in the armchair. As she read aloud, she glanced at him now and then. The boy still wore traces of sadness in his expression, but there was something sweet and deep in him, a kind of longing no luxury toy could fix. In the days that followed, a routine settled in. Grace helped Ethan with his lessons, prepared simple snacks despite the house staff, and spent entire afternoons with him in the garden, drawing with chalk on the stone floor. Little by little, he began to laugh, to ask questions, to touch her arm with trust. Logan, on the other hand, remained distant. He spent most of his time in the office, on the phone, in meetings with lawyers, or pacing the house with folders in hand. He always looked impeccable, but his eyes were always tired. One night, Grace found him in the kitchen, alone, heating up coffee in the microwave. There's a very expensive machine in the next room, she commented, raising an eyebrow. I don't like it, he replied, not looking at her. You don't like things that work? I don't like things that make me feel small in my own house. She stayed quiet, and for a moment, the only sound was the microwave beeping as the heating finished. Ethan seems lighter, she said at last. Have you noticed? Yes. Since you arrived, Logan turned to her. His eyes were softer that night, but still surrounded by invisible walls. Have you ever lost someone, Grace? She took her time before answering. Then she said, my mother. And then, my childhood. He didn't reply. He just nodded, as if he understood more than he cared to. From that day on, they're casual. Encounters began to feel inevitable. They took turns putting Ethan to bed. They discussed the books he liked. They whispered about the news on cold nights out on the veranda. One late afternoon, after a long, quiet day, Logan stepped in too. The garden and stopped at a distance, watching Grace and Ethan draw on the ground. She looked at him and smiled, but said nothing. He returned the smile with a look that said more than any words could. That house, with all its silence and stiffness, had begun to change, not because of renovations, but because of her. The peaceful routine in that secluded wing of the house had begun to feel like a real refuge. Days passed gently between books, drawings, and shared silences. Grace already knew by heart Ethan's mealtimes, his nighttime fears, even the name of the stuffed bunny he refused to part with. And Logan, though still reserved in words, made it increasingly clear through gestures, lingering glances, and subtle dinner invitations that her presence was beginning to fill spaces he hadn't known were empty. But that morning, with skies far too clear for what was coming, everything began to unravel. The first crack came in the form of a visitor. The doorbell rang early. Ethan was still brushing his teeth when Grace heard the housekeeper's voice echo down the hallway. "Mrs. Whitaker, welcome." Grace froze. Her body reacted before her mind could process. Mrs. Whitaker? But Rachel was dead as she slowly descended the side staircase. She saw the woman standing in the center of the hall. Tall, blonde, impeccably made up, sunglasses hooked onto the collar of her white blazer. It was Claire Monroe, Logan's well-known ex-girlfriend, and, according to rumors, the woman behind the breakdown of his marriage. "You must be the nanny," Claire said, with a polished smile. "Or the new occupant of the house?" Grace held her posture. "I'm just the one who looks after Ethan." "Oh, of course. And Logan? Does he look after you?" Grace didn't respond. She simply walked away, leading Ethan by the hand, but she felt Claire's eyes burning into her back. That afternoon, everything shifted. An email was leaked to the press. Attached were forged documents, bank statements, and fabricated messages, suggesting that Grace had demanded money in exchange for silence about Whitaker family secrets. The documents looked legitimate. The media was ravenous. Within minutes, headlines began to appear. Heartbreaker scheme? Nanny linked to Logan may be blackmailing the family. When Grace entered the kitchen, she found Logan sitting at the table, laptop open, head in his hands. "Did you see this?" he asked, sliding the laptop toward her. She read in silence. Every word felt like a blow. Her photo beside Ethan. A fake snippet of a conversation that never happened. "You think it was me?" she asked softly, like someone afraid of the answer. Logan hesitated, took a deep breath. His eyes were dark, torn. "Claire showed me the documents. She swore she came to warn me. Said you were taking advantage. So that's it? You believe her?" The pain in Grace's voice was unmistakable. "I don't know who to believe, Grace. Everything's falling apart. I've got lawyers telling me to keep you away. My father called for the first time in months, demanding I protect the family's name. I need to figure out what's happening." She was silent for a few moments. Then she let out a bitter laugh. "You already did. You just didn't have the courage to say it out loud, Grace." "No, Logan, you don't see me. You saw a woman who was there when you needed someone. But now, when you need to explain me to your world, I become the mistake. The inconvenience." The nanny without pedigree. He stepped toward her, but she moved back. "Ethan will miss me. Only him." That night, she packed the small bag she'd brought from the trailer. On the bed with its expensive sheets, she left a handwritten letter, the script shaky but resolute. "I never asked to be in your world. I only stepped in because someone needed me. And you know it was real. But now, every suspicious look, every silence of yours says more than any scandal. I can't stay where I'm not trusted. I leave with only what's mine, my dignity, my truth, and the affection for a boy I'll never forget." She left without a sound. No demands, no visible tears, but inside. She bled. Grace left without a sound, but the silence she left behind was deafening. The mansion, once pristine and still, now felt like a frame without a painting. Everything remained clean, functional, organized, but dead on the inside. Logan spent the first few days in denial. He drowned himself in meetings, legal documents, calls with lawyers, pretending it was just another problem to solve. But nothing filled the space she had left behind. Ethan's laughter, once shy and soft, had vanished completely. The boy wandered the house in silence, ignoring his toys, asking no questions, barely looking at his father with the same tenderness as before. In Grace's room, now kept closed, the faint scent of hand-washed clothes still lingered. The letter she had left remained folded in the drawer. Logan reread it every night, in silence, with an untouched glass of whiskey at his side, as if hoping to find in it a way to redeem himself from what could no longer be undone. On the 5th day, Ethan fell ill. The fever began at night, first low, then dangerously high. The boy refused food, stared blankly even while lying down, sweating and shivering. But what terrified Logan most wasn't the physical symptoms, it was the silence. A silence that felt deeper than the room itself. It's more than a virus, the pediatrician said after examining him. He's emotionally shaken. It's like something broke him inside. Logan sat at the edge of the bed, eyes full of tears, lost. He picked up the stuffed bunny, the one Ethan always held when Grace read to him, tried to place it in his hands. Ethan turned away. That next sleepless night, Logan went to the office, sat at the computer and began digging through old files. Something inside him, a feeling he couldn't name, pushed him to look deeper. And then he found it. In the archived emails, there was an autosave draft. A document edited multiple times, sent by Claire Monroe days before Grace was publicly exposed. In the file's metadata, he found the source, the same server Claire had used previously for Whitaker family legal documents. Modification timestamps that didn't match the claims. Cross-references with folders linked to lawyers associated. With his father, Logan's blood ran cold. She had told the truth the whole time. And he, who swore to protect her, had abandoned her when she needed him most. Burning with shame and fury, he picked up the phone and called Claire. Her voice came through cold and smug. "You messed with the only thing that matters to me, Claire," he said, voice steady but seething. "And you're going to pay for it. You're throwing everything away for some nobody?" She sneered. "She's everything you never were, real." He hung up before she could respond. For the first time in a long time, Logan didn't feel fear. He felt shame. He felt regret. And he knew he couldn't undo the past, but he could face it. The next morning he called a press conference. Personally, ignoring every advisor's warning. No prepared statements. No legal filters. He wasn't there to protect himself. He was there to tell the truth. The hall at the Whitaker Foundation was packed. Cameras, reporters, microphones. Everyone expecting more scandal, more spin. But Logan stepped up to the podium with no paper in hand, no teleprompter, only tired eyes and a soul laid bare. In recent months, I've been labeled a suspicious widower, a negligent father, a fugitive. And now, a victim of a woman who supposedly tried to manipulate me. But I'm here to tell you, there was no manipulation. What there was love, pure, unconditional, quiet. A murmur moved through the room. He kept going. Grace Sullivan stole nothing from me. Quite the opposite. She gave me back something I thought I'd lost, the ability to trust. When no one else would listen, she opened the door to her home. And her heart for me and my son. She asked for nothing. She gave everything. His image spread across the country again, but this time it was different. The nation that had judged him now listened, and I, cowardly, let lies drive her away. But today I know who lied and who stayed. He paused. His voice cracked, giving way to a heavy silence. She saved my son. She saved me, and now I'm going after her. He stepped down without taking a single question, because the answers that mattered weren't in that room. That same afternoon, he drove 2 hours to a nearby town, where a former employee told him Grace had started over living with her sister. The sun was setting when he saw the little blue house surrounded by short trees, a modest porch, and a clothesline full of drying laundry. His heart pounded. He had rehearsed what to say a dozen times, but now, standing there, all he could think about was her gaze, that gaze that never judged, only received. He climbed the 2 steps of the porch and knocked. It took a few seconds before the handle turned. And then, there she was, Grace, her face tired, hair pulled into a messy bun, and her eyes just as intense as he remembered. "Are you lost?" she asked, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. "Actually, I just found myself," he replied, pulling a small package from his pocket. Inside, the stuffed bunny. "Ethan asked me to bring it back. He won't stop talking about you, and neither will I." Grace clutched the toy to her chest. For a moment, she said nothing, just looked at him, as if trying to figure out whether this was real. Logan stepped forward. "I was a coward. I left you alone. But now I know. Home was where you were." She swallowed hard. "You came too late, Logan. Then let me stay, even if it's outside, until it's not too late anymore." And the door, once only a barrier for distance, stayed open. Just like her heart. Still bruised, but listening. Still closed, but no longer locked. Grace didn't respond immediately. She stood in the doorway, fingers tightening around the fabric of her simple dress, trying to stay composed in front of the man who now seemed like someone else. Logan didn't insist. He simply nodded with a resigned look and took 2 steps back. There was pain in his expression, but also something new, humility. "I didn't come to convince you," he said, voice lower than she'd ever heard it. "I came to ask your forgiveness, and to make it clear that the door you opened for me that stormy night changed everything, even who I am." She said nothing, but after he left, she stayed on the porch for long minutes, holding the stuffed bunny in her hands like a knot of memories that refused to come undone. That night, she didn't sleep, nor the next. Time passed strangely in the days that followed. She came home from the cafe where she'd gotten a modest job, helped her sister around the house, and avoided looking at her phone even though it buzzed with unread messages. Sometimes at night, she heard the news replaying parts of Logan's public statement, now echoed by national outlets. His words carried a new weight, no longer rehearsed speeches, but the voice of a man who had fallen and finally learned how to rise without stepping on anyone. On the 3rd week after that visit, Grace came home and found a box on the porch. Inside was a handwritten letter. The penmanship was shaky, not from doubt, but from emotion barely contained. "I don't expect anything from you, Grace. I just wanted you to know that the project you once dreamed of is in motion, a home for single mothers, a safe place, with a clinic, a playroom, and night classes for professional training, with your name on the front. If you want to be a part of it, the door is open. Just like yours always was for me." LW, she set the letter on the table and sat at the kitchen chair. For long minutes, she stared at the wall, as if bracing herself against what could no longer fit inside her chest. And it was there, in the deepest silence, that she understood. He didn't want her back out of guilt, or pity, or longing. He wanted her back because he had finally understood what love really was. The following week, Grace showed up at the new NGO headquarters without warning. The place was still under construction. Bare walls, the smell of fresh paint, boxes everywhere. She walked through the main corridor to the improvised reception. Her name was already on the front plaque, Casa Reyes, Buy-in for Invisible Women. Logan appeared from one of the back rooms, shirt sleeves rolled up, helping the workers. He looked different. Simple human. When he saw her, he stopped. Said nothing. "You did this?" she asked, eyes brimming as she looked around. "You showed me how," he said. "I just took the first step." She took a deep breath, then walked up to him. There were no speeches, no promises, just a long, tight embrace, as if time had finally stopped running in the wrong direction. 2 months later, they were married in the garden of the very NGO they had built. The chairs were borrowed, the flowers picked from the backyard. The guests were the women and children supported by the project. There was no luxury, but there was truth. Ethan, in a light blue suit, carried the rings. He walked down the aisle with the stuffed bunny in hand. When he reached the altar, he looked at Grace and said, voice trembling, "You came back. I knew it." She knelt, hugged him tightly, and whispered, "I never stopped loving you, little one." Then came the kiss, slow, emotional, of reconciliation and new beginnings. The months that followed bore fruit. Grace returned to her nursing studies and, with the support of the project, secured scholarships for single mothers and launched mental health programs. Logan, on his part, sold part of his family's empire and chose to become a social investor. He traded boardrooms for the NGO's back offices, where he cleaned toys, reviewed spreadsheets, and more than anything, learned how to live again. There were no more cameras, no more scandals, just the sound of children laughing in the hallways and the quiet certainty that sometimes life begins again in the most unexpected places. And it all started with one ordinary woman who, on a stormy night, offered shelter. Without asking who the soaked stranger was, a small gesture, but real, because true love doesn't begin with promises. It begins with actions, and sometimes those with the least are the ones who give the most. And now tell me, what did you think of this story? Drop your rating from 0 to 10 in the comments. I'd love to know how much this journey moved you. If you liked it, don't forget to share it with someone special, and subscribe to the channel. That helps me keep bringing stories that truly touch the heart. And before you go, I've picked another beautiful, intense, and moving story that might touch you even more. I'll be waiting for you there.